why India's space future is at risk, why India urgently needs a space law, and why is no one talking about it. India, despite being a rising space power, still does not have a space law which comprehensively addresses all the issues and risks associated with it. Hello everyone, welcome to Vajiram and Ravi's Flash News. My name is Shubhangi Singh and today we are going to understand that what is the problem which will be caused if we do not have the space law and how it hinders India's future space growth. Now when we are starting with this, let me ask you a question. What are the key achievements that you feel that India has had in terms of space exploration or space sector? So I think you will start with mostly Chandrayaan-1, 2, 3. Many of you might also think about Aditya-L1. Again, when we are talking about solar exploration, Aditya-L1 stands at the peak. And many of you might go ahead and also mention the upcoming Gaganyaan mission where we are talking about human flight space exploration. So in this scenario, India seems that India has been growing up a notch where we are talking about technological strength in terms of space exploration. But I would like you to bring your attention to another aspect of space growth. So when we talk about space growth, we have also seen in last few years that at present we have 150 plus startups, especially in the space sector. Many of them being Skyroot, Manastu, we have Eon and multiple such examples. At the same time, the private sector has also grown in terms of the space sector. When we are talking about missions, we also need to understand that how space sector is also very much associated to space economy, and this can directly contribute to our country's growth, country's global stature as well as economic dimensions. In this very association, we also have to understand the global space market that exists as of now. Now, if we talk about the space market, especially at the global level, at present, India shares somewhat around 2% of the total global market that is present. And this market is expected to grow at a CAGR of 9%, and we will be contributing, when we are talking about contribution, we will be contributing $40 billion by 2040 in the space industry. That means there is a lot of potential that remains to be fulfilled, that remains untapped, and that will be very important for India. And this is where not having a space law is going to hinder us. Now let us try to understand the legal situation that exists in our country. So when I am talking about the current framework that exists, we have majorly two things. The first is Indian Space Policy, which came out in 2023, and then we have In-Space Guidelines. In-Space is Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center, which is under the Department of Space by Government of India. Now, In-Space is responsible for promoting, authorizing, supervising all the non-governmental entities which are involved in space sector. So this is all we have in the name of legal framework, but when we look into the detail or when we look at the fine work, we will understand that there is a huge gap that lies in between. That huge gap comes from the fact that they do not have any statutory law, comprehensive law which is governing the private or commercial activities. When we are talking about in-space or the regulatory decision which are taken by in-space, they do not have any kind of legal enforceability. And because they do not have any kind of legal enforceability, that means there is uncertainty. When we are talking about uncertainty, especially from the perspective of private investment or private sector, any sort of uncertainty only leads to decreased investment, or you can simply understand if there is uncertainty, people in general are reluctant to invest. So for example, if I ask you, I have this particular scheme, do you want to put your money in this? And you are like, what are the possibilities of this particular scheme? What is the output that you are expecting? And I say that is uncertain. So you would definitely not put your money there, and let's just put at the level of private sector. But in that terms, you have to understand at that level, any sort of uncertainty directly affects investors' sentiment, and if there is uncertainty, it will deter investment. That means it will create procedural delays in our economy, space economy, weaken competitiveness, our presence in the global space economy itself. So that is why it becomes very much important to come up with a space law. Another factor that I would like to highlight here, when we are trying to capture maximum portion by 2030 in contribution to the global share, we need to have proper reforms at our end so as to ensure certainty. Apart from that, when we talk about global framework, let us take an example here. We are going to talk about Outer Space Treaty. So when we are talking about Outer Space Treaty 1961, we have to understand the provisions related to it first. Basically, it clearly highlights that space is the province of all mankind. That means space cannot be limited by boundaries, portion, and it is available for all nations, all mankind. And it is for the peaceful purposes only. There can be no usage of nuclear weapon or weapons of mass destruction in the space. Furthermore, any countries, they are internationally responsible, internationally liable if they are causing any damage in the space by national space objects. So that is why whenever we talk about space junk as well, then the countries or states involved, they are responsible for their space junk. Similarly, if you understand about this particular treaty, now when we talk about the implementation, even though India has ratified it, India is part of it, you have to understand when we are talking about implementation, an important factor comes in here is this, that treaty is not self-executing. So if we have to execute this treaty or implement this treaty, we need to have a national legislation which ensures the implementation of obligations of the Outer Space Treaty. India has ratified this Outer Space Treaty. All the liabilities are there. Registration conventions are present with India. But at the same time, we do not have any national legislation or law that can implement the obligations that we are talking about or gives the legal enforceability to those implementations. We have global examples from US, Luxembourg, Japan, where they have proper national legislation which gives enforceability to their space sector as well, protection and also predictability. So if we talk about USA, it has FAA licensing for any sort of launches and re-entries. If we talk about Luxembourg, there is a proper legal framework if we are talking about space resource exploitation that takes place from within their countries. And then if we are talking about Japan, there is a comprehensive law that addresses all sorts of private participation. And at present, India needs something like this, something comprehensive, something that addresses the needs of private participation, the logistics, the issues and everything. Now moving ahead, let us understand that when we are talking about, when we are pressing on the fact that India needs a space law, why does India needs it urgently? So the first factor that we have already understood is definitely the legal certainty and the stability that will come with it. But the second part, that is liability and insurance. If we are talking about Outer Space Treaty, India has the liability for any damages that it is causing. National law, if there is any, if we make one, it can transfer the risk to private players and it can use mandatory third-party insurance. Further, there can be scope for affordable insurance as well, which will protect the startups from the catastrophic damages, losses that will come in. So if we want to bring in this setup of insurance and liability, we need a national legislation, and that too very urgently. Other than that, if we want the private investment to come into this particular sector, we need to give them certainty which will come through national law, a predictable legal regime. We have to give them IP rights, licensing security and investor confidence, which again would require enforceable guidelines and principles. And we also have to address the weaknesses that need to exist, and that can be addressed hopefully through a national legislation, that the clearances are fragmented and present across ministries. in space is policy based, but there is no legal backing to it. Startups face high compliance uncertainty when we are talking about ease of doing business. So the need of hour is an urgent national legislation for space sector. What is the way ahead? You tell me in the comment section. That was all from my side. Thank you so much.